The rain drummed against the windows of Marcus Thompson's BMW as he pulled into the parking garage beneath the downtown courthouse. At 34, Marcus had built a reputation as one of the city's most formidable civil rights attorneys. His tailored navy suit and confident demeanor reflected years of courtroom victories, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. As Marcus stepped out of his vehicle, briefcase in hand, he noticed two police officers approaching from the shadows between the concrete pillars. Officers Jake Morrison and Rick Sullivan had been partners for 8 years, their careers marked by a disturbing pattern of complaints from minority communities, complaints that had mysteriously been buried in departmental files. "Hey, you!" Morrison called out, his hand instinctively moving toward his service weapon. "Stop right there." Marcus paused, immediately recognizing the tone he'd heard described countless times by his clients. He slowly turned around, keeping his hands visible. "Good morning, officers. Is there something I can help you with?" Sullivan stepped closer, his eyes scanning Marcus with obvious disdain. "What are you doing down here? This is a restricted area." "I'm an attorney," Marcus replied calmly, reaching slowly for his wallet. "I have business in the courthouse, my identification." "Don't you move," Morrison shouted, drawing his weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The situation escalated with terrifying speed. Despite Marcus's calm compliance and repeated attempts to explain his presence, the officers' aggression intensified. Their racial slurs cut through the garage's echoing silence like knives, each word revealing the toxic prejudice that had been festering beneath their badges for years. "Please," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm a lawyer. I was just heading to court for a hearing. Check my credentials, they're in my wallet." But Morrison and Sullivan weren't interested in credentials. They saw what they wanted to see, a black man in an expensive suit who, in their twisted worldview, didn't belong in their domain. What they didn't see was the small security camera mounted discreetly in the corner of the garage, its red recording light blinking steadily. The assault began when Sullivan claimed Marcus was reaching for something. The briefcase fell to the concrete with a sharp crack as the officers forced Marcus to the ground. The sound of expensive leather shoes scraping against concrete mixed with the officers' shouted commands and Marcus's attempts to maintain his dignity while protecting himself from their blows. "I know my rights," Marcus managed to say between impacts. "I'm recording this." "You're not recording anything," Morrison snarled, kicking Marcus's phone across the garage floor, where it shattered against a concrete pillar. What the officers didn't realize was that Marcus hadn't been lying about recording. His phone had automatically backed up to the cloud, and more importantly, his smartwatch had been capturing audio the entire time. But even more crucial was something none of them had noticed. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any civil rights lawyer. He was the son of federal judge Patricia Thompson and the nephew of Congressman David Thompson, a detail that would prove catastrophically relevant in the hours to come. As the assault continued, Marcus protected his head while mentally cataloging every violation of his civil rights. Each blow, each slur, each illegal action was being processed by a legal mind that had spent over a decade studying police misconduct cases. He knew exactly what was happening, and more importantly, he knew exactly what would happen next. The beating lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes that would cost Morrison and Sullivan everything they had worked for. When they finally stepped back, breathing heavily, Marcus remained on the ground for a moment, assessing his injuries. His suit was torn, his lip was bleeding, and his dignity had been assaulted. But his resolve had only strengthened. "You made a big mistake," Marcus said quietly as he slowly got to his feet, his voice carrying a weight that should have warned the officers. "A very big mistake." Morrison laughed harshly. "Is that a threat? You threatening police officers?" Marcus looked directly into Morrison's eyes, and for the first time, the officer felt a chill of uncertainty. "That wasn't a threat, officer. That was a promise." Within an hour of the assault, the wheels of justice began turning with the precision of a Swiss watch. Marcus had used the courthouse bathroom to clean his wounds and compose himself before making a series of phone calls that would change everything. The first call went to his mother, Federal Judge Patricia Thompson, who was in the middle of a high-profile federal case when her clerk interrupted with an urgent message. The second call went to his uncle, Congressman David Thompson, who was chairing a committee meeting on police reform when his aide whispered the news in his ear. The third call went to Sarah Chen, the investigative journalist whose exposés on police corruption had won her a Pulitzer Prize the previous year. By noon, three things had happened that would forever alter the trajectory of Morrison and Sullivan's lives. First, the FBI had opened a federal civil rights investigation. Second, Sarah Chen had published a preliminary article on her widely read news platform with the headline, "Federal Judge's Son, Beaten by Police in Courthouse Garage." Third, the courthouse security footage had been secured by federal marshals before the local police department could make it mysteriously disappear. Chief of Police Robert Hayes received the call that every law enforcement administrator dreads. On the other end of the line was FBI Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, her tone professional but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Chief Hayes, we need to talk about Officers Morrison and Sullivan. Immediately." Hayes felt his stomach drop. He knew both officers had problematic histories, but their union connections and the department's culture of protection had kept them insulated from serious consequences. That protection was about to evaporate. "Agent Rodriguez, I'm sure whatever this is about can be handled internally." "Chief, let me be clear," Rodriguez interrupted. "This is now a federal investigation. We have video evidence, audio recordings, and witness statements. Your officers assaulted a federal judge's son in a courthouse parking garage while hurling racial slurs. This isn't going away, and it isn't being handled internally." Meanwhile, Morrison and Sullivan were finishing their shift, completely unaware that their lives were unraveling in real time. They had filed a report claiming Marcus had been belligerent and resistant, sticking to the script they had used successfully dozens of times before. What they didn't know was that their own body cam footage contradicted every word of their report. Footage they had forgotten was being automatically uploaded to a secure server. The first sign that something was wrong came when they arrived at the precinct to find Internal Affairs Detective Lisa Parker waiting for them. Parker, a 15-year veteran with a reputation for thoroughness, had been assigned to investigate dozens of complaints against Morrison and Sullivan over the years, complaints that had been systematically buried by their supervisors. "Officers Morrison and Sullivan," Parker said, her voice carrying an authority that immediately put both men on edge. "I need you to surrender your weapons and badges. You're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Morrison's face flushed red. "What investigation?" That guy was resisting. "Stop talking," Parker commanded. "Right now, I'm advising both of you to contact your union representatives immediately. You're going to need them." As news of the incident spread through social media and traditional news outlets, public outrage built with volcanic intensity. The hashtag number Justice for Marcus began trending within hours, accompanied by the courthouse security footage that clearly showed the unprovoked assault. The video went viral, accumulating millions of views as people watched in horror at the casual brutality displayed by the officers. More damaging still were the audio recordings from Marcus's smartwatch, which captured every racial slur and threatening statement made during the assault. The recordings were played on news programs across the country, the officers' voices now infamous symbols of institutional racism. By evening, both officers had been suspended without pay, and federal marshals had served them with notice that they were subjects of a federal civil rights investigation. Their union representatives, usually quick to defend officers against misconduct allegations, were notably silent, a silence that spoke volumes about the strength of the evidence against them. The mayor, facing intense public pressure and the prospect of federal oversight of the entire police department, held an emergency press conference. Standing behind a podium flanked by city officials and community leaders, Mayor Janet Walsh announced the immediate suspension of both officers and promised a complete overhaul of the department's disciplinary procedures. What happened to Attorney Thompson is inexcusable and will not be tolerated, Walsh declared to a room packed with reporters. These officers betrayed their oath, violated our community's trust, and will face the full consequences of their actions. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed as Morrison and Sullivan sat at the defendant's table, their expensive defense attorneys unable to hide the hopelessness of their position. The evidence against them was overwhelming: crystal-clear video footage, damning audio recordings, documented patterns of misconduct, and testimony from Marcus Thompson that was both compelling and unshakable. Federal prosecutor Amanda Foster had built her career prosecuting civil rights violations, and she approached this case with the methodical precision that had made her legendary among defense attorneys. The charges were serious: deprivation of civil rights under color of law, conspiracy, and assault. Each charge carried significant prison time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Foster began her opening statement. This case is about 2 police officers who believed their badges gave them the right to brutalize a citizen based solely on the color of his skin. The evidence will show that Officers Morrison and Sullivan attacked attorney Marcus Thompson not because he committed any crime, but because they saw a successful black man and decided he needed to be put in his place. The trial lasted 2 weeks, each day bringing new revelations about the officers' misconduct. Internal Affairs Detective Parker testified about the dozens of complaints that had been buried over the years. FBI forensic experts explained how the body cam footage had been deliberately altered in the officer's report. Most damaging of all, 3 other victims came forward to testify about similar assaults they had suffered at the hands of Morrison and Sullivan, assaults that had never resulted in charges because the victims lacked Marcus's connections and resources. Marcus's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Composed and articulate, he walked the jury through every moment of the assault, explaining not just what happened, but how it felt to be targeted for violence simply because of his race. "I've spent my career fighting for justice," Marcus told the packed courtroom. "I've represented dozens of clients who told me stories exactly like what I experienced that day. I believed them, but I didn't truly understand the terror of being completely powerless in the face of badge-wearing criminals until it happened to me." The defense attorneys tried every strategy in their playbook. They claimed the officers feared for their safety. They argued that Marcus had been uncooperative. They suggested that the officer's language had been taken out of context, but with video evidence contradicting every claim and audio recordings capturing every slur, their arguments fell flat. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and delivered guilty verdicts on all counts for both defendants. Morrison stared at the table in shock, while Sullivan buried his face in his hands, the weight of their ruined lives finally sinking in. Judge Harrison, a veteran federal jurist, known for his fair but firm sentencing, showed no mercy during the sentencing hearing 2 months later. Morrison received 8 years in federal prison, while Sullivan got 6 years. Both were ordered to pay significant restitution to Marcus and were permanently banned from working in law enforcement. "Your actions betrayed everything that law enforcement should represent," Judge Harrison told the convicted officers. "You took an oath to protect and serve, and instead you chose to terrorize and brutalize. The badges you wore gave you power, and you abused that power in the most despicable way possible." The ripple effects of the case extended far beyond Morrison and Sullivan. Chief Hayes was forced to resign after a federal investigation revealed the systematic cover-up of misconduct complaints. 7 other officers were disciplined or terminated for their roles in burying complaints against the 2 convicted officers. The entire police department was placed under federal oversight, with court-appointed monitors ensuring compliance with civil rights laws. Marcus used his newfound national profile to establish the Thompson Foundation for Police Accountability, which provided legal representation for victims of police misconduct who lacked the resources to fight back. The Foundation's first major initiative was a nationwide campaign to require body cameras for all police officers and to make tampering with footage a federal crime. "Justice delayed is justice denied," Marcus said during the Foundation's launch event. "But when justice finally comes, it must be complete and transformative. What happened to me happens to people every day who don't have cameras recording, who don't have family in high places, who don't have the resources to fight back. This foundation exists for them." The case became a landmark in civil rights law, cited in dozens of subsequent prosecutions of police officers. Legal scholars noted that the combination of clear evidence, federal prosecution, and serious consequences sent a powerful message to law enforcement agencies across the country. Morrison and Sullivan's mugshots became symbols of accountability, shared millions of times on social media, alongside the caption that would define their legacy. Racist police officers assault black lawyer hours later, their careers are ruined. Their fall from positions of authority to federal prison cells served as a stark reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, could still be devastating in its completeness. The parking garage where the assault occurred was renamed the Marcus Thompson Justice Plaza, and a plaque was installed commemorating his courage in fighting for accountability. But Marcus himself preferred a different memorial. The dozens of officers who were subsequently prosecuted for similar crimes, their convictions made possible by the precedent his case had established. In the end, 4 minutes of racist brutality had cost Morrison and Sullivan everything they had worked for and more. Their careers were destroyed, their freedom was taken, and their names became synonymous with the consequences of unchecked police racism. It was a reckoning years in the making, delivered with the swift and merciless precision that only true justice could provide.